Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel a number of times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, a good few different styles, but if people were to ask me about this brewery, I would say that they're best known for their different kinds of German, Czech, Central European sort of lagers, and also for their kind of traditional English beers as well, actually. They do very nice versions of all these sort of things. They have done many other styles though, and it probably is also fair to describe them as a kind of very solid all-round brewery actually. But the beer we're going to have a look at today is a style that I don't think I've tried from these guys before. This beer is supposed to be a very nice example of that style, and it is a style that I very much enjoy myself. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this one is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to Örebro, which is out to the west of Stockholm, and we're going to have a look at another beer from the wonderful Närke Kulturbryggeri. So this particular beer is called Frågetecken, or question mark, however you want to put it in English. It comes in at 10% ABV, and this one is a barley wine, an English style barley wine, although in Swedish you might call it a cornvins ale. But from what I understand, this is actually a beer that Närke did a good few years ago. It was a friend that sorted me out with this bottle, so yeah, this should be quite an interesting one to review. I will point out as well that according to the label, this one is actually out of date. It says it went out of date in October of 2022, but it's a barley wine, and you know, to be honest, they will last for a hell of a long time. So yeah, very curious to see what this beer is going to have in store for us. So, as always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Närke Kulturbryggeri before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer based on the geography tagging system. So yeah, just go into the homepage, use the search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they should pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries, and you'll find this one in the Swedish playlist along with many other interesting things. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a little bit once again about Närke Kulturbryggeri. So, Närke Kulturbryggeri, as I've mentioned to you already, is based in Örebro, the historic Närke district of Sweden, and this company was founded back in 2003, which makes them one of the kind of old boys of Swedish craft brewing. But the company was founded originally by Håge Viktorsson and Berit Karlsson. Håge had previously had a career as a photographer and an artist before he kind of trained as a brewer, and then Berit is the CEO of the company, but she's also the chair of the Swedish Independent Brewers Association, or the Sveriges Oberoende Mikrobryggerier. But for a long time, this brewery were only really producing keg beer, but in more recent times, they've been producing bottled beer, and it was actually this that helped them grow quite substantially. And this came about after they bought the former brewkit and bottling machine of Nynäshamns own brewery. But the brewery currently produce around 100,000 litres of beer per year, and they're particularly famous for the Kagen Stormax Porter, which was rated as the world's best beer for a long time on Rate Beer. But the beer was originally introduced in 2004 as Stormax Port, but then later, when it was aged in bourbon barrels, it became known as the Kagen Stormax Port. And over the last few years, they've done lots and lots of different versions for this beer. You know, there's lots of different kinds of barrel aging in there, and of course, the pub that I do some shifts in, the Bishop's Arms, we have an exclusive version of that, which is called the Bishop's Kagen, if I remember correctly. So I will need to see if I can sort out a review of that for you at work sometime. I'll speak to my boss lady about that and see if we can fix it, because that would be quite a fun one. But over the next years, the brewery continued to grow, but sadly in 2020, Håge died of cancer, and he and Berit, of course, were husband and wife, so it's kind of a hard thing for the company. But the brewery has been carrying on, And brewers Emil Arvidsson and Jürgen Herling are co-owners, and they now run the production side of the brewery, whereas Berit is taking care of the business side of things, and she still has her involvement in the Independent Brewers Association as well. But like I said to you earlier, this brewery over the years has become very well known for their kind of traditional English and Central European type beers. And as of January 2023, when I'm producing this review for you, these guys have created around 145 different kinds of beer. So yeah, that is all I can really tell you about Närke Kulturbryggeri for the moment. If you want to try some really interesting lagers and stuff like that, this is a brewery that you definitely need to check out. And of course, the Örebro bitter is a very nice English bitter as well. It's one of the few English bitters that I actually really enjoy, come to think of it. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about them for the moment. If you want to learn more, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. And you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all of the different beers that you guys have done. So yeah, let's look at this then. So, like I said to you, this one is a 330 milliliter bottle. The artwork is very similar to what we've had from Närke Kulturbryggeri in the past. You can see they have the proper bottle cap on this one, the Inget Blesk, nothing shit basically. And so yeah, 330 milliliter bottle. I have no idea what this beer would have cost. I actually have no idea when it was released, to be honest with you. But yeah, on Untappd it does have a pretty good rating, so we'll need to see what this beer is all about. But a traditional English style barley wine coming in at 10% ABV, the Närke Kulturbryggeri Fråge Tecken, the question mark as it would be in English. So yeah, let's get this guy out and we'll get on with the tasting then. I'm very, very curious to see what this has in store for us. So remember that there are kind of two different kinds of barley wine, the English barley wine and the American one. So in my opinion, the English barley wine is kind of more roasty and toasty and kind of dry fruity in character, whereas the American barley wine is a bit more oily and a bit more kind of sweet and bright in its fruity notes actually. So yeah, a little bit more toasty character in the English one as well, I would say. So yeah, always interesting to try them. You don't find too many English barley wines about these days, but the style has been gaining again in popularity a little bit. There's a lot of interest in more traditional beers these days, I have to say, which is quite interesting to see. But anyway, we've got this beer out into the glass now, and I have to say it looks very, very nice. So on the head, before it kind of disappears completely, you can see that this beer just poured with a very, very small head, maybe about a quarter finger, and I would say it's faded away now to pretty much be a very thin, foamy and wispy layer on the top, but you've just got that nice kind of ring around the edge of the glass there. I would have said that that was a kind of light sort of fawn colour, but yeah, it goes together very, very nicely, I have to say. So in terms of the colour of this beer, I would say that it's got a very rich, sort of very slightly ruby leaning chestnut to it. So remember, the colour of these beers depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker coloured beer. But any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts that you put in will affect the colour of the beer as well. But yeah, when it comes to barley wines, they can be affected a little bit by barrel aging, but it's quite hard to do that. But in terms of the colour spectrum of the barley wine style, I would say this is kind of one of the brighter ones that I've seen in recent times. But I have to say the colour is very, very nice. It's got a little bit of a naturally hazy kind of note to it. But yeah, I think it goes together very, very nicely, I have to say. So nothing particularly surprising about the appearance of the beer when you think about what style it is. 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass and a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head there. But overall, it does look pretty damn nice actually. I like how this beer appears. So yeah, I think we can have a little look at the aroma of this one and see how we get on. Very, very curious. Yeah, I have to say, this beer is pretty damn nice actually. Yeah, aroma wise, this is proper old school. It gives you everything you would want from a traditional English barley wine. You've got the dryness, you've got the sweetness, you've got the fruity character, and just a little touch of hoppiness as well. So remember, the barley wine was originally the big brother of the double IPA. You've got the family of beers, the pale ale, IPA, double IPA, then barley wine. These beers were all related through their malt to hop ratios. That was the thing that kind of changed as you went up the scale. Whereas I think, the modern triple and quadruple IPA basically uses the double IPA hop to malt ratio, but they just put more malt in and make it stronger essentially. That's kind of how it goes. The barley wine has a slightly different malt to hop ratio, but this one is very, very nice. So let's break down the aroma for you and just describe that a wee bit more in depth. So in terms of the malty backbone of this beer, straight away you can smell the this beer has a nice kind of quite dry bread crusty backbone to it. There's a little touch of woodiness in there as well, and yeah, I just think that goes together really quite nicely. Yeah, so lovely little touch of woodiness to this one. Yeah, lovely little touch of woodiness to this beer, which I think is absolutely great. In the backbone there, so you've got that kind of dry bread crust. You've got that little touch of woodiness as well, and on top of that, you start to get a kind of thicker and quite dry, almost like rye bready character out of this one. So yeah, that's interesting. It is a little bit like a German rye bread. Yeah, dry bread crust, a little bit of woodiness, the kind of more kind of crisp and slightly dry rye bread. But above that, you start to get a slightly sweeter and kind of brown bready character out of this one. So yeah, lovely kind of sweet brown bready character in there. It goes together very, very well. Sweet, wholemeal brown bready character, a little bit of dryness to that as well. But there's one or two little nutty elements within that bready character which I find really interesting. So it's the kind of graininess and breadiness in this beer that makes it more of an English barley wine than an American barley wine. That's what I would say. But above all of that, you've got some lovely brown sugars to this one. So you can certainly smell that there's a kind of dry, leathery character to this beer. So yeah, you've got lovely, smooth, kind of dry, leathery character coming out of the beer. For me, that usually indicates a bit of a longer wort boil. So absolutely, a little bit of a kind of longer, dry, brown sugar, a longer wort boil. The more that brain is not working, the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a more leathery flavour out of the beer. You can certainly smell that in this one. But on top of that, you've got a little bit of treacle molasses, although I would say the brown sugars in this beer are actually quite bright, to be honest with you. You've got a lovely sort of sweet caramel in there. So yeah, lovely sweet caramel in there, a little bit of a kind of more dark treacle molasses, also a little bit of dry toasty caramel as well, and then you've got those big leathery brown sugars too. So yeah, the way this beer goes together, I think, is very, very nice. Yeah, aroma wise, I think this beer does go together pretty well. Yeah, I like this one. I do like it for sure. On top of that, I don't know if there's really that much to say about the kind of malty side of things. I think we've kind of covered everything. It's proper old school. It doesn't really do anything surprising for the style category, but it just shows you everything that you would expect, and everything goes together pretty nicely. But yeah, let's look at the hoppy side of things and the fruity side of things and see what that has in store for us. So on the hoppy side of the beer, the one thing you have to remember with barley wines is I'm not sure exactly how old this one is or how long it's been sitting in the bottle, but what will happen over time is that your hoppy character will drop out of it a little bit. The barley wines have quite a lot of hops in them initially, but like I say, it drops out over time. This one isn't barrel aged either, but yeah, you do get a little bit of a remnant of hoppy character in this one. You can smell there's a wee touch of earthiness in there. There is a little bit of herbal character, which makes me think, Bramling's Cross. I think that's the most likely hop they would use in this one. Probably a little bit of East Kent Golding or something as well. But yeah, bit of earthiness, bit of herbal character. You do still have a little bit of floral aromaticity in this one, and you've also got a wee bit of a kind of grassiness too. And yeah, the way that that goes together is quite nice, but you're still getting quite a bit of brightness from the floral and grassy character too, which I think is quite nice. So yeah, aroma wise, I have to say this beer does go together pretty well. But yeah, I like it. Certainly do like it. On top of the, other than that, I don't think there's anything to say about the hoppy character with this one. I'm just quite surprised the hoppiness has lasted quite a wee bit. So on the fruity side of things, there's quite a wee bit of interesting stuff going on. For me, the fruity side of the beer is quite it's got a little bit of sharpness to it, but it's also got these kind of more typical dry fruits that you'd expect of the English barley wine. So there's a little bit of raisin in there at the start. You've got a little bit of a kind of plummy note underneath for sure. So yeah, wee bit of raisin on the top, wee bit of plum. Then you've also got a kind of prune character in there. But then you're starting to get, you know, the dates and the sultanas and stuff like that. There's a little bit of an oily pear actually as well, and within those kind of dry fruity notes you get the impression of like a kind of brandy soaked bread, absolutely, and it's quite strong actually. The fruits do have a little bit of kind of zip and pungency to them, which I quite like. So you've got that nice oily peary note in there, you've got that nice oily peary note in there as well. You've also got a little bit of fig and a little bit of blackcurrant, and then maybe just a wee bit of blackberry on top of that. But yeah, for me it's the kind of peary, sultana, date and black currant that kind of dominate this one. So yeah, you've got a lot of interesting stuff coming out of this beer, but a properly old school English barley wine, this one. But like I said, Närke Kulturbryggeri are known for these more traditional beers. They always do a nice job of them. I do hope I can try their Scotch ale at some point, because they've got a few different Scotch ales that they've done over the years. So yeah, I think we can have a taste of this one now and see what it has in store for us. So as I always say, take a little bit of time to just enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck into it. But we're going to taste this one now. So yeah, this is the Närke Kulturbryggeri Frågetecken. A barley wine, an English barley wine at 10% ABV, one of their older beers that I managed to get hold of a bottle. I managed to get hold of a bottle of the. Does that even work? But anyway, let's taste this one. Sláinte, skål, cheers, let's get stuck in. Oh, that's interesting. First impression of this one, this is a lot lighter and a lot less kind of thick and chewy than I thought it was going to be, just from the aroma. But it's got a lovely smoothness to it as well. Yeah. This is really quite nice, I have to say. Yeah, the way that this beer goes about its business is really interesting. It's not quite what I expected, I have to say, but it does. From the aroma, I was expecting a lot more kind of brown sugar and kind of chewy stickiness and stuff to this beer, but it really leans a little bit more toward the kind of bready side of the spectrum. So yeah, like a properly old school English barley wine. Actually, this is really, really interesting. So yeah, thumbs up to Närke Kulturbryggeri for doing something different with this. But the smoothness and cleanliness and lightness of this is quite surprising, I have to say. But yeah, this is what you want on the channel when you've reviewed like 3,700 odd beers. You want things that are going to be a bit different. And this is certainly very nicely done. So yeah, you get more sweetness out of this though the more you drink of it, I will say that. But yeah, it's quite, this one is one of these beers that deviate, where the flavour that you expect, it deviates quite a wee bit from the actual aroma of the beer. So, middle third of your palate then, you can feel that nice kind of bread crusty backbone, and it's nowhere near as dry as I thought it was going to be from the aroma either. It's got a little bit of graininess to it, but it's quite nice and smooth. And then further forward on the middle third of your palate, you get a little touch of a woodiness out of this one. So yeah, smooth bread crusty character in there. So yeah, smooth bread crusty character in this one. Further forward in that, you've got a little bit of a woody note, and then above all of that, you have a nice kind of fluffier bready character. So yeah, the bread crust, a little bit of woody character in there. On top of that, you've got a nice wee kind of rye bread note to it, and you can feel the rye bread actually has a little bit of sweetness, and for me that comes across as quite German. So I wonder if they're using, I get the feeling they probably are using German malt in this one. But yeah, you've got a little bit of that kind of almost German, dense but slightly sweet rye bready character. And then above all of that, you've got a wee bit of a more kind of lighter and fluffier brown bready character. So yeah. So yeah, definitely a good bit of bready base to this beer actually. And within the kind of lighter and fluffier brown bready character, you've got more. You do have more of a kind of nutty. You've got a little bit of nuttiness in that kind of thicker, that kind of lighter and fluffier brown bready character. So yeah, I do like how all of that pieces together actually. So yeah, flavour wise, in that sense, the bready character in the beer is quite nice. Above all of that though, you do have more of you have a little bit more of a kind of brown sugary character, and you do get wee elements of cakey character out of this beer toward the front and back of that middle third of your palate. But yeah, above the kind of smoother brown bready notes, you get the leathery brown sugar, and the sugar on this one, as I say, this is the surprise for me with this beer. The surprise for me with this beer is that the brown sugar isn't just a little bit more kind of thick and oily and chewy, but yeah, above the wholemeal brown bread, you get that sort of leathery brown sugar coming out of the beer. And as I said earlier, when you have these leathery flavours, that's usually an indicator of a longer wort boil. But with this beer, I'm not overly convinced of that, because you would also have a bit more sweetness out of it. So yeah. And in fairness, yeah, if you focus on that middle third of your palate a wee bit more, you do get that. But yeah, the brown sugars in this beer are quite layered. You've got that leathery layer underneath. Then above that, you've got a little bit of a kind of toasty, a light, airy kind of toasty caramel. Then you've got that more oily, sweet caramel in there too. I don't know if, I'd maybe say it in the very dead centre of your palate, which is of course the concentration of the boozy flavours. That's when you have the more kind of treacly and molasses type characters coming out of the beer. So yeah, as I say, a bit of a leathery layer, a kind of more light and toasty layer, oily caramel, then treacle and molasses. And yeah, I think that describes what's going on with the brown sugars in this beer. But overall, it's a very, very bready barley wine in the middle third of your palate, and that's where you get the biggest complexity in this beer, the majority of the complexity. So yeah, on the back third of the palate then, so border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you get that more airy, you do get that more kind of airy brown bready character out of the beer. But the base of the back third of your palate is a little bit more light and bread crusty. You've got a little touch of an almost kind of crackery, woody type layer above that. Then you've got a slightly taller, more rye bready note out of this one. So yeah, you've got that slightly taller, sweet rye bready character. So yeah, kind of more oily, light rye bready character out of this one. Then above all of that, you have the more airy wholemeal brown bready note in there as well. So yeah, as I say, you get the same kind of layers on the back third of the palate, but they just feel a little bit taller. For me, this is a kind of common thing I've noticed in a lot of beers recently. But above the kind of more airy wholemeal bready character, you get the more yeasty notes coming out of the beer. So there's a little bit of honeycomb in there. There's a little bit of there's a little bit of honeycomb in there. You've got that light airy sort of brown bready character as well, and I think all of that goes together very, very nicely too. So yeah, flavour wise, I think this one, the back third of the palate, is quite interesting too. But yeah, you get a lot of airy yeasty character in there, which is quite nice. But definitely back third of the palate, you can feel the flavour is taller. Then as you come further forward, it just condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. So yeah, I think that covers the malty and yeasty side of the beer. Let's look at the hoppy side of things then. And as I said earlier, there is a surprising amount of hoppy character left in this beer when you consider that it's probably, I think this beer's probably about 2, maybe 3 years old, something like that. But anyway, I don't know how long after they bottle them they put the date for. So yeah, need to see. But in terms of the hoppy character in this one, you can still get quite a little bit of that. So we'll check on the green component first, back corners of the palate moving forward. So yeah, back corners of the palate, you've got that nice little bit of earthiness in there. As you move further forward, there's a little bit of a herbal character, and as you push toward the kind of front corners of your tongue, there's a little bit more kind of floral aromaticity coming out of the beer. Round the front curve of the palate, you've got a little bit of that lighter grassiness coming on, and yeah, I think that goes together really quite well. So yeah, a little bit of an earthy character, a little bit of a herbal note, and as you push forward, there's a wee bit of bright floral character there. I do wonder, I get a feeling there's Bramling's Cross in this, but potentially a little bit of German Northern Brewer as well, because you have got that brighter floral note and the brighter grassiness there too. So really wouldn't be surprised if it's a combination of English Bramling's Cross, which is popular for barley wines, and German Northern Brewer, which is good for Doppelbocks and things like that. And if you think about the flavour profiles of these beers, they're not a million miles away from each other. But yeah, good. Still getting that green component out of this one, which is quite surprising considering this beer is probably 2 or 3 years old at this point in time. But I like it. So front third of your palate then, and the fruity side of things. The border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you get that nice little bit of bready build up in this beer, which I do quite like. So lovely little bit of bready build up in there. The base of that front third of your palate, you've got a little bit of woodiness, and you've still got a bit of that kind of brown bready character, but then above all of that, you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. But yeah, that the fruity side of this beer is really quite interesting in that sense. It really leans more toward the traditional English side of things, to be honest with you. Now, the more that I think about it, and the more that I taste this beer, so in that border region between front third and middle third of your palate, you do get a little bit of the bready build up, but it shows you that kind of like brandy soaked fruit loaf type thing. That's the sort of flavour that I'm getting out of this one. But yeah, if you go to the top of the back half of the front third of your palate, there's a teeny little bit of raisin, a teeny little bit of plum, but yeah, for me it's more like it's a kind of dry prune. There's a bit of date in there. There's the sultanas. As you move further forward into the middle of that front third of your palate, you've got the kind of oily, you get the oily pear, but you also get a little touch of like a figgy character. And as you move into the front half of that front third of your palate, you start to get the red fruity notes. So there's a wee touch of like blackcurrant in there, and maybe just a little bit of blackberry. But yeah, the fruity side of this beer really leans more toward that kind of peary, sultana, datey type flavour. So yeah, the way that this goes together is really interesting in that sense. So yeah, the way the beer goes together that way is quite interesting. Yeah, definitely those fruity characters are more, you know, associable with are more associated with an English style barley wine, and the kind of breadiness that this beer has and the kind of dryness that it has too makes it more of an English barley wine for me. That's how I define this one. They say it's an English barley wine. Absolutely, it is. It's proper old school, this one. But I like it. It's something different that we haven't reviewed all that many of on the channel, I have to say. So yeah, it's a thumbs up from me. An interesting beer from Närke, and I just would be curious to know exactly how old this one is, because it says it's best before you the 20th of October 2022. So I don't know, maybe it was bottled 2 years ago or something like that. But yeah, it's about 3 months out of date at the time that we're reviewing this one. So yeah, in terms of mouthfeel though, to round off this review, I would say this beer, it's kind of top end to mid bodied, to be honest with you. I don't know if I'd put this as full bodied, because like I said, it's very light and very clean in some ways as well. And I've always said this about Nordic beers, particularly the Norwegian and Swedish ones, they're always very, very clean. The flavour profile is pretty much spot on. This is not meant to be a kind of dig at the beer or whatever. But yeah, the flavour profile is really kind of spot on for an English barley wine. But yeah, very kind of top end of mid-bodied, clean, slightly oily mouthfeel though, but still very light. The carbonation is very smooth in this one. You've got a lovely kind of you do have a lovely sort of, you've got a lovely little touch of bitterness to this one, but I don't think this beer is going to be more than, say, 20 IBUs at the absolute most. But you've also got a wee bit of dryness in there that could be conflated with bitterness. The malt base has the dryness, the smoothness, the sweetness, and the toastiness on top. Then the fruity character in this one is kind of oily and a little bit sweet. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together in that sense, I think, is really quite interesting. But a proper old school English traditional barley wine, which we don't review too many of, and that's what makes it quite interesting for me. But yeah, definitely this is a beer that deviates a little bit from what you expect in the flavour when you smell the aroma. You know, the aroma and flavour perceptions deviate quite a little bit. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. So this was the Frågetecken, a very light and drinkable barley wine, English style barley wine, which is very true to the original flavour profile. So yeah, kudos to Närke Kulturbryggeri for doing something a wee bit different with this, and it just kind of goes to show their prowess with the kind of traditional English and German and Central European beer styles. So yeah, thumbs up to them for that. But yeah, this one was the Frågetecken ? A 10% English style barley wine from Närke Kulturbryggeri in Örebro here in Sweden. Until the next time, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Närke Kulturbryggeri as well, and we will no doubt return to these guys again very, very soon. But until then, slange, skål, cheers, see you guys in the next review.